Hello, friends. You know that Marvel is full of light, happy things, but that when Paul and I go into the DC universe, we are talking grittiness. We are talking darkness. We are talking about deep morals, questions of the soul, as our characters wrestle with their godlike status. And so today, we are bringing all of our dark grittiness to discuss the new DC movie out, Superpets. All that more after a commercial break that I hope isn't for dog food.
Superpets!
Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host. I'm joined by Mr. Paul Hoppy. Paul, how are we doing?
Doing good today.
Yeah. To our listeners out there, if you've seen Superpets, or even if you haven't, if you know a little bit about the marketing campaign, you probably could guess that entry into the podcast was a tad felonious. This was actually a fairly light movie, but it actually hit pretty hard in some places and was honestly, it was a lot better than I had any right to expect it to be, and brought up some interesting questions that I'm looking forward to talking about. So, Paul, let's just kind of dive right into it. What was kind of your thought going into this movie, and what was your thought coming out?
Yeah, my thought going in was cautiousness, and mixed with a little bit of hope. And my thought coming out was basically the same.
Yeah.
I felt like it delivered pretty much what I expected. A combination of some of the things that I expected and did not like, and then a lot of actually what I would hope for and stuff that I did like. And it definitely, it's animated. It's about talking animals, although they don't talk in a way that humans can understand. They talk to one another. But I mean, I think it's like, it definitely deals with what I feel are more serious issues than like the Justice League, like either version of the movie, like it's not visually dark, right? But it's like, there are some really heartbreaking character moments.
I was cutting onions at one point in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, it definitely hit pretty hard. As a way of framing this, because I think it is like, there's a level of analysis that I think I'm going to bring, and I certainly think you're going to bring as well, that I don't expect the movie wanted us to be bringing, but I think is worth getting into, which is that, the whole question about how do humans treat animals when it comes to pets and things like that. And I'm curious, just kind of a starting point for you as a vegan who has very strong feelings about the way humans treat animals in terms of seeing them as, food or using them for clothing or any of that kind of stuff. What's your take on the idea of pets in general?
I'm going to reference a line from Appa's Lost Days, which is one of my favorite episodes of anything ever. It's an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's about Aang's friend, Appa, who's a sky bison who gets kidnapped and then abused and then escapes and then gets kidnapped again. And I just rewatched it actually, and it's like very sad, but also feels very real. And there's a line in it where one of the airbenders, who, spoilers, eventually gets genocided, says to Aang and other young airbenders, a sky bison is a companion for life. And I think the difference between a companion who you care for and, some people consider this like a dog parent, right? Right. Like, this is a kid and you're taking care of them.
Cats as well. Certainly you get that.
With cats as well. Yes.
A lot of household pets.
Yeah. I think a cat generally is more someone who lives where you live and tells you what to do.
I mean, parents of teenagers would tell me that that's exactly what that is.
Right, exactly.
You're still paying their rent and their food.
Yeah,
and
cats act like teenagers more. That's true. Yeah. That's true. Although, again, this is generalizing. Like, I've known cats who've been very stereotypically doggish, and I've known dogs who are much more sort of stereotypically cattish, right? But, the idea of is pet a word you're using to refer to, like, someone you own? Or, like, really look at in this, like, oh, they're so cute, blah, 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 but, like, you don't really take them seriously on any level? Or is this, like, someone you're caring for and, you understand that, like, just out on the street, like, they're probably not going to do so well. Maybe they will. I had a neighbor two places ago where there was a cat named Midnight who lived in the neighborhood who, you could say was this person's cat, right? But like,
Right.
I wouldn't say this was this person's cat, and I wouldn't say this person would say this was their cat, particularly because of the way they phrased something. It was like a sort of outdoor-indoor cat, right? And I would say that was that cat's person, And like the person said to me, well, Midnight used to live in the house, but then he decided to live outside. Like, she just had the door open, and like either the cat decided the cat wanted to live indoors, or the cat decided the cat wanted to live outdoors. Either way, it had a place that it could live, and it was like always welcome back and fed, and was really just a delightful cat. Like, it's just a giant black cat who was like super friendly. Like, I'd be walking down the street and then just like run up to me, which is like, that's like a very stereotypically like what you think of how a dog might behave.
Yeah,
but like,
exactly.
that's definitely, I mean, the first cat, and when I say my cat, right, like, I mean like the way I say my friend or my mom,
right,
or my wife, where like some people, maybe they mean that possessively, like, oh, this is my but it's like, no, I just mean like, that's the relationship. But the first cat that, I mean, my mom and dad had a cat and a dog when I was born, but then they both died when I was 2 or 3. And they were both like 17, 18. They lived, long, full lives. But then our neighbors found this alley cat, and like just on the street, and asked us if we wanted to have her be our cat, have her live in our house. And I named her Paul Christopher Hoppy Cat, which I think demonstrates my very early narcissism and disregard of gender norms.
I like it.
And then, we got shortened to PCH Cat, and then I would just call her Cat. And like, she was just this like badass, like really like mean to most people or dogs that she'd meet, or like not like mean, but just like, tough, right? Like a New Yorker. But like, I would come in and she'd just like run up to me, and like she would like, run over to sit like where I was sitting, and like follow me around, and I wasn't even the one who was feeding her, right? Often that's like whoever's feeding a cat or a dog or whatever other animal. That's that's a person who's going to get a certain amount of attention. But yeah, so I think the idea of pets is like, it's one of those words that can be used in different ways, right?
Right.
And so within the context of this movie, like, this is called DC Superpets, but like really only Crypto is like a pet at the beginning. And I would say that the way that relationship works between Clark and Crypto is they're best friends,
Yeah.
like really. And I don't think, Superman thinks like he owns Crypto. It's like, no, Crypto's his best bud from infancy, literally, right?
Yeah.
So
Like, given that so much of the movie centers around, him developing a new girlfriend, Clark getting more serious with his girlfriend, and Crypto feeling left out, like, every high school TV show has had that kind of scene where, the two best friends, two people of any gender who are best friends, and then one of them starts dating someone else, or just develops a new hobby or whatever it is, and that other person feels like, oh, you don't have time for a relationship anymore. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, and like, because in some ways it was like, he does kind of treat him like a pet in like the taking for granted way a little bit, but no, it's not really taken for it's not really taken for granted, except on some levels, but also it's just like, people do that to each other all the time,
right? Exactly.
And on both sides, both in terms of the like, oh hey, like maybe you should have said something about how things are going to change, but also like, maybe you're feeling very possessive of this person and your dynamic in a way that's not really healthy for either of you.
Right, exactly. And yeah, I'd like to circle back to that very quickly. I just want to say like one more thing on the concept of pets, and like, I mean, you have things like puppy mills, and people specifically breed dogs or other animals for being sold, and like, I think that's disgusting. And there's tons of dogs and cats and whatever other animals without homes, who it's like, aren't specifically created by humans to be a commodity for other humans. And so it's like, if you want to have a cat or a dog or whatever other animal in your life, like just take care of one of them, you know?
Yeah.
It would be like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to make a parallel to like humans and creating more humans and whatever. But like, you know, the point being just like, there's a lot of animals in need of a home and love. And it's like,
I mean, I actually will compare it to humans a little bit, because I think in terms of like the term commodification that you used, I think matters a whole lot in terms of like, okay, is this about you wanting to bring another living sentient being into your life? All right, we can argue about like sentience and what that means, but like, you know, an intelligent, you know,
animals are sentient.
A living being that has agency and understanding and intelligence, for sure, and sentience, may be appropriate. I think I hear so many different definitions of that word, but yeah, sentience is probably just an appropriate
sentience
word.
Literally means the ability to feel, right? Like to feel emotions, and it is sometimes used as like meaning human-like intelligence, which I think is just a misuse of the word. So
that's fair. That's okay. So so like, if there's the like having a pet that is like thinking of it in that terms, and then there is the like, this is a commodity, and where it's like, I want to be able to like go to dog shows and show it off, or I want to have this like very popular breed that's like considered this, or I want to have like, you know, and I think that like there's a level of like wanting to sort of like very much tailor this new living intelligent creature you're bringing into your life to fit very specific ideas, where the more you're doing that, the less you're going to be open to this other being wanting to do other things.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely a thing that parents do with children,
for sure.
You know, and that's absolutely a thing that people do with romantic partners and sexual partners, especially in terms of like, you know, when someone's like locked into, I want a blonde who's this tall and like, you know, this size or whatever, you know, it's like, it's, and that, when you're saying I want this other living being in my life and putting those kind of very strict restrictions on it, like, you are kind of treating it more like a commodity, you know, that has to check off boxes instead of just being open to being surprised by, hey, this cat now wants to live outdoors. Okay, well, maybe I'd love it to be in my house all the time, but it doesn't want that. So I'm going to adjust to their reality as much as my own.
Yeah, and like if you live in New York, I think that's, you know, like in Manhattan, that's like a less reasonable choice to basically... Yeah. It's like you wouldn't let your 3-year-old kids just like go out and play on the street, right?
Right,
But like, you know, if you're in a little cul-de-sac in Northern California, it's like, you know, the cat wants to live outside. The cat probably knows how to get around and not get run over by cars, you know?
Right.
Although at the same time, it's like you could make an argument that like you're afraid of that for them. And okay, you know, that's... You can't have that conversation like in human words the same way you can, right? With like, But also like with a 3-year-old, you might not be able to explain it the same way that you could to like a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah, I think it's very true. So with that kind of established, I think we started to talk about our thoughts on the movie. But let's go into let's first talk about like what are things you really enjoyed about the movie.
So first of all, just the premise of a movie where the protagonists are non-human animals is just always a positive to me, right? Yeah. Like it's representation, you know? I will contrast this with something like Appa's Lost Days, where here, you know, the animals are all speaking in English to one another, right?
Right.
Or other languages, depending on what dub you listen to. But so, you know, they're not meant to be actual representations of exactly how like our Earth animals like behave, right?
Especially because like people can get into questions about like how much do animals within their own species communicate with each other, and I think there's some arguments that there are like a lot more language things than we thought. Yeah. But like in this movie, like turtles and cats and dogs and hamsters and guinea pigs are all communicating quite easily to each other. So that's especially to me where it's like
conversations in with English grammar and everything, right? So, so like that's not, you know, whereas Appa's Lost Days is like, I mean, granted, Appa is an airbender, right? And can suck cabbages out of the cart from where he's imprisoned, which is fantastic. But it definitely, you know, Appa there feels more like an actual non-human animal, how they would perceive the world and interact with the world. And of course we can't know exactly because we don't have like direct accounts, but that feels more like a, you know, they took a non-human animal character, and they're like, we're gonna have this be the protagonist of this episode. And so like that's like, to me, that's like on another level. Here, they're basically anthropomorphizing, right? They're like saying, well, what if these animals were more exactly like humans? And so I think that makes it easier for people to relate to, right? And but on the other hand, it also, I'm not saying that this movie would have been better if it did it differently, but I think it can have a little bit of the message of like, well, these animals are worthy of like respect and life and care because they're like people, right?
Right.
And it's like I don't think animals have to be like humans to like, I don't think that's the reason that their lives have value, because like the more they are like humans, right? But like, I think they have interesting relationships. I think
Can I actually just break in about the communication thing?
Yeah, do.
I definitely had some thoughts along that line. There were two things I think that for me helped it a lot. One of which was the idea that they could communicate freely with each other and they could understand humans.
Oh, yeah.
But humans couldn't understand them. Which in some ways, like, they're actually now better communicators than humans in some ways. In that, like, they can understand that, like, the understanding can go that way. And I also feel like I really appreciated that the communication with each other wasn't tied directly to superpowers.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
If like, you know, Ace hadn't been able to talk to Crypto until Ace got those powers, I think I would have been like, oh, there's something weird here. Like look, these are like super pets, exactly that.
Yeah.
But part of it was like, no. Long before they get powers, they're all communicating. Long before Lulu got her powers, she was able to like develop a crush and develop a secret plan and basically become Pinky, just, you know, like without her brain. I'm sorry, become the brain without Pinky. So yeah, anyway, so just wanted to throw those out and then go on.
Yeah, totally. And I'd say I probably identified less with like Crypto than with Ace. Who I just thought Ace's backstory was fantastic. You know,
so good.
Of like, basically Ace got adopted by this family and had a really great relationship with the kid who's very little and you know, pre-verbal, right? And then the kid's about to walk down these stairs and Ace, you know,
I think fall down the stairs is the appropriate phrasing.
Right. Is walking towards the edge of the staircase and is about to go fall over, and Ace grabs the kid with, you know, with his mouth, because it's like that's, I mean, doesn't have fingers, right? So and pulls the kid back from tumbling over, and the kid's crying because it almost fell over the steps, and then the parents are like, oh, this dog bit our kid and we're gonna get rid of him. And I think, you know, I think that is a real challenge, right? Like when you have a dog and a little kid and neither of them can you really fully communicate with verbally, right? Like you could try, and I'm sure there are better ways and worse ways to handle that. I mean, I for a long time had a scar on my nose from, you know, the aforementioned dog Woody, who, you know, and it's like, it was my own fault, but also I was like 2, you know, but like I just stuck my face in you know, this dog's face, and he's like, what are you doing? You know, get your face out of my face. And it wasn't like a terrible bite, and it wasn't horrible. But like, I mean, that happens, you know, and so it's frustrating that the parents were then just like, oh, let's just get rid of the dog, as opposed to like try to find some other solution. But but then the thing that's so like, I think powerful is like later on when Ace is like, you know, if I had it to, like, it was the worst day of my life, but also if I had it to do over again, I would just do the same thing. Right.
Yeah, because I mean, it is clearly he has that kind of desire to be a hero, and it's far and away the most heroic thing he's done.
Right.
I mean, he quite likely saved a life, or at least saved someone from being very badly hurt.
Yeah.
And I thought that was definitely the moment that I most teared up, and the way it was handled was so beautiful, because I think it's easy to tell that story in a way that the family appears like super awful, terrible parents who didn't deserve this dog and you know, are going to harm the kid. But they're not. It's exactly what you're talking about. And like, I have good friends who were utterly heartbroken when just like their dog or cat just didn't get along with the baby that came into the house, or with an already existing pet. Like, you have a cat, you bring home another cat, and the two of them are just, they cannot get along.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them try to do things like, take the, like you can do, like, especially with dogs, you can do some kind of like help training to help them get used to someone new in the house. But sometimes they had to make that decision. And yeah, the way, I think that was to me and again, that's also where I was sort of like, the dog understands more about Ace understands more about what happened in that situation than the parents do.
Yeah.
Because the parents can't, and like, yeah, you can say maybe they could have had more curiosity and try to, but like, how are they going to actually put those pieces together? Neither the baby nor the dog is going to be able to really like tell them that.
Yeah, to me, it's less about reconstructing what actually happened and figuring that out. Because like, I totally understand. Yeah, they can't, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're unable to do that. But having some amount of compassion and understanding that, like, this doesn't necessarily have to be a repeated event. This might be some particular circumstance, and maybe there's some way of handling things. And maybe like, don't let your baby walk around with just like a staircase that they can fall down. Like,
put a gate. There's a
exactly. There's a thing called baby proofing. They didn't read those books.
As well as like, because I think the other thing that struck me really hard, and I think this was intentional, but I'm curious how you thought about it, was that sort of like the pet shop that all those animals were in.
Right.
Because that's where it looks like they're in prisons. They're all in these tiny cages. They're all fairly sad.
Yeah. They're
not getting much attention. And there's definitely a sort of sense of like, oh yeah, the cute cat's going to get adopted far before we are, which there's probably some truth to. I mean, humans have different loves of different kind of animals, and like that's a thing, but it's definitely, there's stuff going on there. But like, yeah, and again, like to me, the parents, like in the situations I'm talking about, generally it's not, oh, hey, let me just walk this dog down to the pound. It's, hey, here's a Facebook post to my close friends who I trust. Do any of you want a wonderful dog or a wonderful cat? I want to find it a really good home. Like, I get that if you do that, there's no story, but I definitely have like, if I judge the parents for anything, it's that they didn't try to rehome Ace in a good situation. It's just, okay, he bit the kid.
Right.
Because I think that is a little bit of the like, once the dog is no longer a welcome member of the family, well, the dog doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have. We're not going to be concerned about the pet.
Right. They don't treat him like a person who needs a new home. They're just like, oh, we'll just get rid of him. And I mean, there's worse ways to get rid of a dog, obviously. But yeah, the fact that it's a pet store as opposed to like a shelter is also a little bit interesting, right? Like, I think they're selling those pets. I'm not sure. It's like a little unclear. I don't think we see any, financial transactions taking place. But my mom ended up with 6 cats at one point in life, right? And that was because I would say 2 of them had been kind of my cats that like it was my idea to take in these cats from both from people we knew, right? I mean, we knew people, one in our building, one an ex-girlfriend who had these cats and like for whatever reason weren't going to keep them. And so I was like, well, we need to take care of them, right? So then of course my mom ends up taking care of them because, I'm a awful teenager and, just like at some point I was like, I'm not going to have cats in my, in my house because at that age, I just didn't feel like I was going to do a good job of taking care of them,
right.
As like a young adult. And, but so I basically end up dumping these 2 cats on my mom, in terms of like, I mean, they also became more attached to her. And one of them ended up being like, I think her second favorite person in the world ever after me. But maybe first. No. Hi, Mom. But yeah, that was Mr. Suki. And then we had Luna. And then there were 4 other cats, 2 of whom, which were her sister's cats, and then 2 of whom were her brother's cats. And her sister and her brother both died within a year, which was obviously horrible. Right. And then my mom ended up taking all the cats. And so she had 6 cats. And the thing was, 2 of the other cats, one of her brother's cats and one of her sister's cats, did not get along with like any other cats except for the one that they had been paired with, right? So it was like a brother-sister duo, and the sister of that duo just was like mean to everybody. And then there was another 2 cats that were her sister's cats, my mom's sister's cats, my aunt's cats. And one of them was like really just the sweetest little cat I've ever seen. That was Miss Suki. And then there was this cat, Annie, who was just like so possessive, right? Like, this is my person. You don't, like, you would go pet one cat, and then she'd come and stick her head between their head and your hand, you know? And so she couldn't keep, like, she for a while lived in a house and like had all these cats in different rooms, you know? Yeah. But like, for one, like, cats don't love being stuck in a room most of the time. And for two, it's just like, you know, she wasn't going to continue living alone in this house with enough rooms to keep all these sets of cats. So she ended up, you know, giving two of the cats to some childhood friends of mine, right? Or the father of a childhood friend who took care of them until, you know, they lived to like, one of them lived to 19, you know, wow. Which for a cat, and was like a healthy 19-year-old cat. Also another beautiful big black cat who, you know, Bart, and I guess I should name Lily. That was Bart's sister. And so like, you know, she was able to help find those cats, like directly find, you know, a happy home for them. And like, I don't think they could have been more well taken care of than they were, you know, and I mean, they were extremely loved. And so it's like, if you're just like, I can't take care of these animals, I do think there's like, if you decided to take care of them, it's up to you to like try and find a home for them, right? And so I would say long-windedly, you know, those parents could have definitely done a better job of that. You know, on the other hand, maybe you just moved to a new city, you know, literally no one, and like, you know, maybe your life story is just like, I don't have anybody that I trust on that level, and then it's like, I don't know what you do.
Because also, like, the dog is probably not going to realize that they're doing that. You know, if they are, like, sending emails and messages and, you know. So, there's a lot of...
although, I mean, if it is someone you know, then you can still go visit them, right? And you can kind of help them adjust and stuff like that. And so I do think that there's something there, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I kind of sort of jump you and miss my own stuff, but back to you, kind of like things that you really liked about the movie. Or that, like, it brought interesting questions you wanted to get into.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the main thing, you know. I'll circle back now to what you were saying about sort of Crypto and Clark's relationship, you know, where there is that, like, they're best friends, and then there's a woman, you know, and like, this is an age-old story, right? And it doesn't have to be like two male friends and then a woman. It can be like, it can be any combination of any genders, right? But like, and I mean, I've had that exact configuration before. And then I've also had like, you know, a group of friends and then met another group of friends and been like, I'm just going to be friends with everybody. What's the problem? And then the original friends, or some of them, were like, this is, you know, you've deserted us. And I'm like, what do you mean deserted you? Like, we're still friends. But then we weren't friends because they decided I couldn't be friends with everybody, right? And it's like, it's difficult, you know? And that's a real thing. Like, whether it's jealousy or whether it's sort of possessiveness over someone else's time. But like, you know, there also is a reality to this situation of like, you know, when you meet someone new or you get another interest or whatever, like, you probably are going to have less time for whatever else there was before, right? There's only so many hours, frustratingly. And so, I mean, it just felt like a very real kind of issue for people to be dealing with.
I mean, as you can imagine, this is something that comes up in polyamory all the time.
Right, I'm sure.
But one thing that I think some of the readings and content creators who are poly, who I really love the most, are very clear on is that, like, no, actually, like, yes, in poly, we become the most aware of it, but it happens all the time, you know, and it's anything from, like, hey, I'm starting this new job, and now I'll be, like, less likely to be able to, like, do this other thing with you, or, like, any kind of thing like that. And I think where I come down on is, like you, I've been on both sides. Well, I at least I've been on both sides of this. I think you were talking about being on kind of one side. I don't know how much you've ever felt on the other. And I think definitely, like, at different times in my life, where my insecurity is where I think I've handled it better or worse. But, like, to me, I look at that situation and I think that both of them are doing something a little bit wrong. Like, both of them are a little bit at fault.
Okay.
And what I mean there is because I think Crypto, yes, there is much more, and in some ways I'm kind of more, it's more Crypto, I think, who has to go through the growth because of, like, he has no interest. Like, Clark wants to meet other people. He wants to develop other interests. Yeah. He wants to have a girlfriend. He wants to have the job. Crypto wants the two of them just kind of like what you were saying, like, no new friends. Like, be locked in with the two of us forever, which is very unhealthy. I think, though, that...
I don't think it has to be. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
If it's what both people want, I think that's fine. If
Right.
it's what one person wants and not what the other person wants, obviously, then you have a problem.
And I think if it's what both person wants because one of them is very afraid, one or both of them are deeply afraid of change and are deeply afraid of like I think there's a way to make it healthy for sure, but there's also a lot of ways to make it unhealthy.
Sure.
But putting all that aside, to me, it's the like, like I'll give you an example. Recently, one of my partners, her job changed somewhat, and so she's now working different hours. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we talked about, and also she started joining a bingo league, which is awesome and great, and but it realized like she was playing bingo now on a night that often we would do things together, like virtually or something like that, and. She was very conscientious about being like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to start doing this bingo thing more. And so actually, like, I'm not like asking your permission, but letting you know, our regular Tuesday plans are going to change somewhat. So maybe we should do something a little bit different, Right. And in the same way, like every time you and I have changed our recording date, if I had kind of a standing plan on that night, and I think if there's anything Clark does wrong, I think it's that it never occurs to him that crypto now is invested in the idea of Thursday night is movie night.
Right.
And thus that crypto would be disappointed that it's now not happening.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of like, I think both are really important. I think like for crypto being so possessive of it, but also for Clark part of the conceit to the movie, I think, is that most humans don't think a dog will understand if they say, hey, we're not going to do movie night on Tuesdays anymore, but don't worry, I'll still make time to watch something with you. But I think that's kind of the point, is that, like, maybe we as humans don't, not... I'm getting very lost in the thought here, because it's not that I'm saying that I think actual dogs would understand that level of understanding, but I think certainly in human-to-human contact, having that level of respect for, hey, we're changing plans, and I just want to make sure you know, and this isn't because I like you less or anything, but then also with, with animals, that, I think there's a lot of things that we do that change the lives of animals around us quite a bit, that we don't always take into full consideration how this is going to change things for them.
Yeah, and I pretty much totally agree with all of that. I think with, like, when it comes to animals who, aren't going to understand your full grammatic sentence, right? Like, I mean, right. I think often animals do understand a lot of words, right? Mm-hmm. But, like, don't quite have the same models for grammar that humans do in the brain, right?
Right.
And I think there are ways that you can be like, okay, I know that this is going to change things, for my animal companion, right? And so in understanding that, I'm going to try and maybe make sure that I, give a little bit more affection and attention at certain other times, right? Like if this usual schedule is what it is, if, just understanding like when you're changing something in their life,
right.
and seeing kind of what you can do to kind of like mitigate whatever, sort of downsides there might be of that.
I have a friend who has a dog who I was actually talking to about this movie, and he actually told me a story about how, it used to be that he was working from home, and so he would, take his dog out for like, a run and some playtime as like his lunch break every day during the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And then he got transferred. He got a new job, which meant he had to go into the office again.
Right.
So he planned this intentionally, that like a week before he had to start going to the office, he started doing a morning, like take the dog out for a run and some playtime, so that the dog then got used to that. Like for a week he was doing both times, and then started to like slowly stop doing the afternoon one, because now the dog was already used to like a new thing,
right? Yeah, and I think that's a great, very thoughtful way of approaching something like that, because I mean, there's truth to like when our lives change, it's not always fully, within our own control, right? I mean, personally, like I'm like constructing major changes for like the next month, and like possibly longer than that, and it probably would have been better to do farther in advance and kind of like figure out exactly how to go about that. But like I did try to make sure that like the study groups that I was like, look, this isn't what I need to be doing right now, but like I very much appreciate all of you as people and like our interactions, and they've been helpful for me in the past, but like I need to do this other thing now. But like I want to be clear that that's not like, because I don't like you or because like I don't think there's value in it. It's just like it's not what I need to do now,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's like every time I've moved, that's often the conversation I've had, especially if I have partners or really good friends in the city I'm moving out of. It's like, hey, this is a new situation for me, but it doesn't. The legit. I often feel like there's a very big difference in like, what are the logistics of our ability to do fun things together versus what's the emotion that we feel and the enjoyment we get out of it, and like, reassuring people, animals, whatever it is, those aren't the same. So there was some superheroes in this movie.
There were. And super villains.
We can talk a long time about just like the psychology of human and pet relationships, but let's talk about some superpowers and some supervillains.
Can we start with the supervillain?
Yeah.
She was so good. Lulu.
I think she's the best, of most of the DC stuff that I know. Yeah. Like, putting aside the new Batman movie, she's one of the best DC villains I've seen in a while in terms of like having some real motivations that are understandable. And like I'm thinking of who was it in Justice League? Steppenwolf. Like he just
the movie
wants to twirl his mustache.
He was a middle manager who wanted to please his boss in the second one, and the original one he just wanted to conquer the world because
Ares wants war because he's the god of war, and Ra war, and then the other guy in Wonder Woman 1984, I think, just he wanted to prove that Wonder Woman couldn't have it all.
I'll actually just on the subject of DC villains. I mean, I think animated DC villains have historically been fantastic. And
fair. Yeah, I'm talking more about the. I think I'm comparing this to the other like in theaters big.
I think DCEU has definitely lowered the bar for DC villains. Like, I mean, if we think about, like all the Jokers have, okay, you can say what you want about the Jared Leto Joker, but basically every other Joker, I think, is almost universally, like, at least appreciated on some levels,
Yeah. And that character is written as just having fantastic motivations, or as fantastic not
lack of motivation just like the Joker's just the Joker. But like Lex also, I think often, like in the Justice League animated series, is fantastic.
Yeah.
In Batman vs Superman, maybe less fantastic.
Yeah. But like, I think the thing that I liked so much about her is she has all of the Kate McKinnon. Kate McKinnon, thank you. Yeah. Her comedic timing is brilliant, and she's chewing scenery right, left, and center. She gives you all, like, a mustache-twirling villain in a sillier movie can be a lot of fun if they're just clearly, like, loving that role.
Yeah.
And they kind of gave us the best parts of a mustache-twirling villain, but then also in, like, 2 sentences and 10 seconds of flashback, gave her a very legitimate motivation, which is...
Right.
She's a guinea pig that was being tested on in some horrible ways and like dealt with that trauma. She basically trauma bonded and had Stockholm syndrome with her torturer.
Yeah.
And then
thought they were working together for science.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when, as I commented to you, he had his sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Right.
She became like now like jilted lover as well as like,
but still a villain. Right?
Yeah,
like
still
she didn't
very
stop
much a
being
villain.
a villain. She wasn't like, oh no, I will now have my hero turn and save everyone from Lex. She's like, no, just screw Lex too. You're all... And then she ends up teaming up with Mercy.
At the end, and they're both like, screw Lex. Let's
Exactly. Which I just thought all of that was perfect. I think Kate McKinnon is like one of the funniest people on earth. And
Agreed.
She's just perfect in this role. Yeah, and just, I don't know, an evil hairless guinea pig. Like, it's just, who are...
so good. And then the way they...
nor from Guinea, but...
they turned all of those other guinea pigs into her, like, soldiers.
Yeah.
And then all of them were at first just ridiculous and funny, but then all of them wound up getting to have some kind of stories. Like, one of them kept studying Spanish, and two of them teamed up with heroes, as, again, I think, at the end of the movie, the way all the heroes adopted a pet, adopted an animal... But I think very much as companions, as like crime fighting buddies.
Right.
Not
yeah,
as,
exactly.
Which was just, again, so well done.
Yeah, for sure. And like, there's an angle you could look at and be like, well, they're just exploiting the powers of the the super pets. But like it actually, the movie has a lot of heart, and I do feel like there are actual connections between the characters, and not like just like, oh, this is my sidekick that I don't actually care about.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Batman treats Ace better than we've seen most Robins treated over the years.
Yeah, that's true. A very different Ace than the Ace in, Batman Beyond, who I always like to think was named after Ace of the Royal Flush Gang.
Agreed. There was some kind of a reference to Royal Flush Gang in this, if I remember. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Right,
but
I don't remember what it was.
Let me ask you this, though, because one of the things that I was very concerned about, and it turned out they saved it well, was... Because I, both from the marketing, but also just from what I know about animals in DC, I quickly put together that Kevin Hart's dog was Ace. And I was really wrestling with the idea that a dog that had been part of the Bat family would have somehow wound up in this pound, in this, animal prison.
Yeah.
Did you have any of those worries, or were you just like, oh, this can't have been the dog that Batman's owned already?
Yeah, I mean, I like pretty instantly was like, oh, that's Ace, right? Before they used the name. And... I was kind of like, I don't think this... I guess I didn't have the concern as much because I just felt like that wouldn't have made that much sense, And, I mean, it could happen, I mean, Robin gets kidnapped all the time, you know? But, yeah, and, like, Ace escaping and then Crypto being all, like, super cop, basically.
Yeah.
It was pretty much like, oh, Crypto...
Oh, it was so good. Yeah, like I was like, oh, Crypto, ACAB, man, ACAB. Like
all canines are oh no.
Yeah. But it also makes sense. I mean, I think that's like the dynamic between Superman and Batman is one of kind of the founding ideals of this podcast, in terms of like their different approaches to crime fighting and vigilantism and all that. And I thought they did a great job of having those two characters mirror that, but clearly in very different ways.
Yeah, for sure. And then each having a very real relationship with one another, and then also with their human companions or their future human companions. Which I just got to say, Batman was voiced by Keanu Reeves, which also just felt like perfect. And I mean, just the whole voice cast was excellent. We've been covering Andor, so we've got to mention Diego Luna as Chip.
Oh, the Squirtle was so good. It was so good.
With electrokinesis.
And it's just like, I think sometimes there's a perception, especially in stuff among young people, that like mental illness or just kind of like, not being like completely the most brave is a white thing. That's for like rich white kids. Right. And so having this very Latine coded squirrel with Diego's accent, having a lot of anxiety and having kind of be the scaredy cat of the group, I really loved, because it was just like, yeah, anybody of any background can like just be a little scared of situations, because
for sure
you're used to this like small little environment, and now you're out in the big bad world, and there's guinea pigs who can summon lightning and all this stuff, and it's terrifying. And you can summon lightning, and it's terrifying.
It's like, how does this work?
Yeah, it was just. In a lot of ways, it to me, this kind of fits into the same category of the Lego movies, but kind of like Lego movies, I feel like, are very focused on parody and self-referential stuff, whereas this is more kind of like a loving tribute or loving but with a little bit of parody in it. But to me, it was just like, it was exactly, if I wanted to sit down and really like wrestle with the questions that Batman and Superman wants to wrestle with, this is not the movie I want to watch. But when I watched it, because I was like, I just want something entertaining, and that'll maybe make me think a little bit, and this is absolutely the movie, and I can imagine myself rewatching this movie. I'm not going to watch it 4 times in a week, but I'll probably watch it once a year or so,
Yeah, it. I'm curious to see how it will age for me. I had planned to rewatch it. I didn't end up, partially because of time. A little bit because of motivation. I was just like, I didn't feel quite ready to watch it again. Also, I wanted to rewatch Appa's Lost Days because, oh geez, Appa's Last Days sounds depressing. I mean, not that Appa's Lost Days isn't a very sad story, but it ends up okay. Spoilers.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I need to rewatch that, and I have a bunch of notes on that, which we don't have to get into all of those, but yeah, I think this movie was fun, and then also had some things to say, and then also had a few moments that really, to me, contrasted with the positiveness.
Let's talk about some of those.
Yeah. So at one point, there's a fire in the pet, I think, store, but whatever that place is, right, where all the animals are. Which, if it's not a store, if it's more of a shelter, then it's I don't know what you're supposed to do aside, have cages, right? But, that's difficult. Maybe fostering is, the way to go, but that's difficult. But so, anyway, a fire breaks out, and I want to get the name right. PB, who's the, who becomes Wonder Pig, basically.
Right.
Right. Which there's
name's still under consideration. There's still a bunch
name's
of
still under. That's right. Thank you. Yes. So she is sort of on fire, and then she's like, "Oh no, I'm on fire and strangely hungry." And I'm just I understand how that joke plays to people who like to eat pigs.
Right.
But you also have to understand that to someone who thinks that, pigs are intelligent social animals, because they are, and that humans raising them and slaughtering them and trying to prosecute people who rescue injured piglets for 5 years in prison, which was a recent court case that fortunately they actually got acquitted, despite saying, yes, this is what we did. We took these 2 injured piglets that you said were valued at $42 a piece, and you're trying to give us 5 years in prison for doing that. And they were acquitted by a jury, because the jury was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But, that basically making a bacon joke or whatever isn't, that's not cool in this movie. That's that undermines kind of some of the good. And if the rest of the movie hadn't been as good and as positive as it was, that would have bothered me a lot more.
Yeah, and I will say, as someone who is a meat eater, and I talked before about I'm moving into more ethical eat, but honestly, if I move into kind of the perfect way of eating, if I move more and more into eating only the kind of way I would eat, I'd probably only eat pig, because I do think pigs are, in terms of raising them ecologically, are far less damaging and can often be really helpful to keeping land good for other kind of uses, much more so than cows or chickens and stuff like that. That being another story, but so my point being,
in terms of environmental impact, right?
Yeah, exactly, stuff like that, and that there's some great work on that, kind of one of the perfect ways to have a fairly ecologically sound, self-contained farm,
right.
Is having a lot of crops you're growing and pigs, and kind of using that to balance the soil and all this kind of stuff. Many people are still going to be you shouldn't eat any kind of animals, and that's completely respectful.
Yeah,
but my only point being,
but go ahead.
My only point being, as someone who loves bacon, as someone who loves pig, and also wants them treated well and all that, that joke also bothered me, because it was just I don't, I do think that about 10 years ago or so, I was talking to someone who was well, I can't eat pig. Pigs are super fun, wonderful, smart, intelligent creatures. I can only eat, food from the bacon beast, because bacon is just basically convincing themselves that bacon didn't come from a pig, because that was the way they could only be ethically okay with it.
Right.
Whereas I was, a number of years ago, I had a friend who raised goats and butchered goats for meat, and loved these goats and treated the goats very well, but did murder them for food, as many people would see it. And I made myself, I was he invited me to be part of one of those slaughter sessions, and I did so, in part because I was if I'm freaked out by this, I need to not be touching meat at all.
Right.
We're getting into a very different kind of set of questions here, but all of it was just to say, I think you can be on whatever place you are, and that joke just struck me as really in bad taste, in terms of I don't know, I'm not even sure how to quite put it into words, but
I mean, to me, it feels like it's incongruous with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. It's like, it's sort of this idea of like, I guess what it almost made me feel is that like, it's a kind of self-awareness of like, oh yeah, we are all about like loving these animals as sentient beings and all this kind of stuff. But also like, haha, like we all might kill them one day for food, you know? And like, I don't think that killing them for food is wrong necessarily, but that feels almost kind of like bullying or almost like just, I don't know. I think you put it into words much better than I could, but.
Yeah, it just seems like to me, it feels like very insensitive. Like basically, know your audience, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say read the room, but like they're not in the room with the viewers. But like, when you're making something that's hopefully going to appeal more to people who like animals more, like maybe don't make jokes about, killing them.
In some ways, I don't think this is intentional, but I could imagine, I would put at higher than 0 the number of like 4, 5, 6-year-olds who will watch that movie and kind of like ask mommy about the joke and then put together this adorable creature is bacon and be like, I don't want to eat bacon anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't even remember why I asked the question, but like, I didn't know that meat came from animals. And when I learned it did, I was like, oh, hell no. Like, hard pass on that. Like, we're not doing that,
Yeah.
I did, though, for like the first 6 months or whatever of otherwise being a vegetarian, convince myself that chicken McNuggets didn't actually come from chicken, that they were all artificial ingredients, which I think like that maybe has a grain of truth to it.
Yes.
Right. But then on my 6th birthday, I was like, no, okay, we're done with this.
Yeah. So. In the same way that I'm pretty sure a vegan can eat Domino's pizza pretty safely,
Because it's just not made with any actual,
No, not at all. Okay, but so back to so what are some of the other things that kind of just were struck a wrong note for you?
I don't remember it exactly, but there was something that was almost identical to that, but like a little less later on, and then there was like a little bit about just sort of the use of the word pets and sort of the idea that like, these animals and their feelings matter because they might have a connection with humans,
Yeah.
And I thought that wasn't perfect, but those were really my only complaints about the movie. Overall, like I think the story was like coherent and pretty fast paced and like, but also like took its time when it needed to. Maybe the 3rd act was like longer than it needed to be, which is like the case with like a lot of things, but like, I didn't have a lot of complaints. I had one very specific complaint that arose maybe twice out of the thing. And otherwise, I just, mostly really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, I think because, like, for me, I think to me, the idea of, like, having an animal companion as someone who shares your life, like, I have no objections to that. My father and then my spouse has very bad allergies, so I've never had that myself, but I've always enjoyed the pets of others. And I'm also just like, I don't know if I'd want to do all the care. Like, I just wouldn't want to do all the caretaking.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing where it's like, if it's not what you want, then you definitely shouldn't do it, right?
And
if you don't want a kid, you shouldn't have a kid.
Yeah, to me, the things that have always bothered me is when I do see that. Like, I certainly had friends, I think some of them were your friends as well, who had these like very large dogs in small to medium apartments in New York City. And I always felt really sad about that because they would just get outside and just be like, I don't know much about dog psychology, and some of them may have been very happy in these situations, but I definitely have seen some, and I've read some advice from dog experts who are like, don't have these kind of dogs if you don't have like a big backyard, because it's just, they don't love not being able to like go out and play. And I think in many ways, I think what I liked most about this movie is a lot of it was really about like, taking seriously the concerns of the other people who share your home with you.
Yes.
Because I think, like, it's funny because at the same time I watched an episode of another TV show, completely different, not a superhero thing at all, but like there were these 2 teenagers who went to like a state fair and played, like a shoot water in the mouth of a clown thing, and won a goldfish. And it was just like they gave them like a plastic bag with a little goldfish in it, and thousands of those are given away every year. And I'm going to bet that like less than 5% of them are actually like put into nice bowls and like treated well, and let, a lot of them wind up being flushed down toilets or just like not treated well at all.
Yeah.
Or
that just seems like a horrible thing to do. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like every year around Easter time, like animal rights groups put up a whole bunch of things of like, don't give your kid a bunny as an Easter gift. You know, if like in 2 weeks the kid's gonna get bored and no one's gonna want to like take care of that animal.
Adopt a bunny if you really want to have a bunny in your life for the lifetime of a bunny. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I definitely overall like this movie. It did a lot of the things that I really want from a super, like putting aside if they're just all like animals or whatever.
Yeah.
I just thought like as a superhero movie, it was like. There was probably like 5 or 6 characters who had recognizable character arcs, who had motivations that all like, it's not Andor level of like character development, but like it's a lot better than some other stuff,
For sure.
There wasn't really any moments where I was like, oh, come on, that character wouldn't do that based on what you've told us. Like, they painted with very broad brushes. It didn't get into the nuance of like The Wire.
Yeah.
But the broad brushstrokes it did were all fine. Like everything lined up. It was a good story. It was coherent. It had a fantastic villain. Yeah. And if they make Superpets 2 and it's about Mercy and Lulu out on their next caper, I'm in.
Yeah, I'll watch that.
And like, it could be that those two are the antagonists, or it could be some kind of like dark, Mercy's 11, where like, like Lulu's 11, and I'll watch a heist movie with those two doing some bad things.
I'm in for a heist movie. Oh God.
Well, because you already have Harley and her warthog, or no, what's it? Harley has a hyena.
The hyena,
I'm trying to think if you got like basically Suicide Squad and their pets, but like not quite the Suicide Squad level, but just a bunch of like Catwoman, Poison Ivy with a plant, not a dog, an animal, Harley with her hyena, Lulu and Mercy, like. Yeah, now I want that movie. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Doesn't Harley call the hyena Bruce or something?
I think so, yeah.
Which then is like, does she know who Bruce Wayne is? Is that what?
No, she just has a crush. She like, because he's like he's like people's most eligible battler.
She doesn't know who Batman is.
Yeah,
I think he just called him a battler.
Yep. But that's the thing. Like,
I love it.
Yeah. In the Harley Quinn show, they would absolutely make that joke.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I think it's a good time to wrap up. Any last things you wanted to say?
Yeah, just in response to the large dogs in the city thing and dogs in the city in general, our good friend Logan Grendel, I actually edited a book that they wrote called, I want to find it. If you just Google Logan Grendel dog book.
I think it's Putting Paws to Pavement.
Yes, that's right. Putting Paws to Pavement. Logan talks a lot about, I don't even remember how much of this is in the book or just in our, usual 2-hour conversations, but about how the city actually is a really interesting place for dogs, because there's like so much to smell. There's so many other dogs and people to socialize with, right? And like, obviously you don't want to just like let them run out in the street and get hit by a car, right? But but that it's that a lot of times there is a little bit of a thought, oh, the city's no place for a dog, but it's like, that's just a voice in dissent to that opinion. Yeah. And I do think like if you have a shoebox apartment, like, it's something to give thought to, but.
Yeah, and let me say this. My understanding is, both from what I saw among people growing up and what I've read from like dog experts and people I've talked to, that there are certain breeds of dog that just really, that like 1 hour of playtime outside the house a day is just not enough. That they need like a big yard or something like that. Right. And to me, that equates to large dogs, and it's probably a much like that.
It might be more specific or something.
Yeah, Logan probably knows much better than I. Yeah. That like, a lot of dogs can do very well in the city. It's just specific kinds of breeds. But what I was referring to is like animals who just, the clear sense I got was that like whatever care that you could treat them very well in the city. But it's a little more complicated than just opening the door to your yard. But these dogs weren't getting that necessarily.
For sure, yeah. And so I think it's less like a thing where it's like, oh, definitely don't do this. It's more like, give thought to this, right? And make sure that you understand what their needs are and that you have a way of meeting those needs.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I definitely, one thing I saw a bunch of was people advertising like, hey, you've been working at home for the last 2 years. Now you're going back to a job in an office. Here's some things to think about how your dog is going to feel, your cat's going to feel that you're no longer home 10 hours, all the time. Yeah. And just be thoughtful and adjust it. So, all right. Well, thank you all for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you seen this movie? Did you not see this movie? Have we convinced you that you should go see it? You can find all the ways to contact us on theethicalpanda.com, Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. I have some emails back from some stuff a while ago that I haven't gotten to yet, which I apologize. We definitely will do so. Paul keeps doing awesome things under Zen Madman. I just watched an hour of a poker stream that was really helpful for me if you're trying to get better at poker, that kind of thing. If you're playing in poker games against me, don't watch because enough, you're fine. But if I'm not in a chance to take your money to poker table, definitely check out Paul's stuff. A lot more writing and other stuff that'll be coming down the road. So theethicalpanda.com, search for Zen Madman in all the places, and most of all, be good to you, all the sentient beings in your life.
Thank you so much, Brian and Cliffy, for joining today and all the days in the past. And also to the Ethical Panda and Zen Madman in the chat. I'm just reading names in the chat. I'm like, wait, that's me.
Yeah.
Robin Hood and Buffy, of course, as well. And Star
Special thanks to Zen Madman.
I actually just thanked myself.